Welcome back, everyone. I'm salivating right now to introduce you to someone who has been a mentor to me in some of my hardest days, Shiloh Sophia. I'm going to call her the feminine goddess artist that's out there that helps us learn how to create process images as females and put our voice and ideas and visions on canvas, and is the founder and creator of intentional creativity, one of my favorite forms of really digging into good, juicy consciousness nuggets. And she's also an incredible, radical, evolutionary community leader. So, welcome, Shiloh, warmly into the space.
Oh, thank you, Julie. Hi, everyone. I'm really delighted and um, I feel like honored to just be in your presence right now and really consider my time with Julie um, life-changing, ritualistic. So you're in for a treat, and we're here for it.
Yeah, we're here for it. And likewise, back to you. You were one of the catalysts that really had me start to think about in what worlds does wildlife, wisdom, and money medicine come together for women over 50 really facing this turning point in life of wanting to serve and have impact and contribute in significant ways. And I reached out to Shiloh just a few days ago, and this is totally a bonus sacred sister circle kind of conversation. There's no scripts, and we're here for liberation and freedom and clarity at this kind of epic quantum quickening that we're in this sort of disruptive turning point, it feels like. And I wanted to reach out to you because I've learned more about lineage from you and in your authentic presentation of that, and that you've been so conscious about how you've lived lineage and have had many experience of it. Mine are now in the all energetic state because I wasn't paying attention to any of that. Would love for you to open us up with, what you know to be true about lineage and feminine lineage.
Hmm. Thank you, Julie. And I just really want to invite anyone who's tuning in right now to create a field condition with us of the unexpected. Like, I'm
Yeah.
actually here for me and for Julie and for you. Like, I want to have a revelation about what's next for me while we're here together and we don't know what it is. And we've prayed and we're following life force flowing through us. So we just want to invite you to the same thing. Like, instead of being a participant, recipient of what we're doing, actually just engage and be as if you're called to the circle and that we're here for you and you're here for us and we can feel you right now. So I just want to start with that condition, which will
Yeah,
shift
thank you.
everything that happens.
Yeah.
For me, I feel like, we are in a really curious time as a species. And if you look at the past 500 years, and we look at the United States specifically, we have what Native Americans call the 500-year War. We have the advent of bringing beings from Africa and enslaving them. And we have never made repair.
No.
And this 500-year timeline is also existing in South American conquest places, right? Like, there's like something interesting about this timeline. And what I'm feeling, even though it's a little dramatic, is that we are actually in a cycle of conquest.
Yeah.
We're navigating it differently, and there are different, classes and privileges who are experiencing it in different ways. But the degree of oppressive behavior and recovery from oppression, like when I work with women, I've worked tens of thousands of women, that we can't get anywhere until we remove the layer of oppression that they didn't even know was there and they thought they didn't have because they had a middle class life or because they were this or because they were that. But it's like we're not even aware, we're just so in it, and we're living in a state of being where the place where we live has never made amends. And so the impact of that is present. So I just want to start there. And then there are those of us who weren't necessarily raised in our cultural heritage. My family left Africa 80,000 years ago. And so I did have a culture in my family, but we're looking for, where do I pray? Where do I worship? What song do I sing? Is it okay for me to play the drum? Like, we're searching for culture that's authentic to us. And so for me, where I looked actually was in my own family. So I happened to come from a family of artists. And what I did as a young person is I said, what are the things that each one of those generation passed to the next one as the most essential thing? And
Mhm.
what would that be called if I looked at that behavior set? Like, what was the most significant thing my grandmother taught me? What was the most significant thing that the woman who co-parented me with my mother? What did my mother want me to know? And I sort of looked at those things that were passed on, and it's about 10 or 15 teachings, but I could spend the rest of my life living them because those teachings are a practice. And so I decided to claim it and be like, I have authentic right to these ideas that were passed from person to person to person. And I'm the third generation to receive them, and then I pass them to thousands, and then thousands pass those to thousands. So I tend to the lineage like that, but it's a philosophy, it's a worldview, it's a perspective,
Yeah,
and it's created culture,
I
but
love
it
that.
works. Yeah.
I love that. And you're one of the few people I know who's, like I said, been really aware of this. Like, I feel like what's happening in the world, what's happening in the US, we're just scooping you into this conversation because this just all happened really quickly. And I want to share a story because I think what's afoot, one thing I think is afoot here is the reclaiming of the lineage of the prosperous feminine, of the gifted feminine being prosperous, being um, revered, being heard. This is not an against men thing. It's not about that because there's plenty of men with beautiful, sacred, masculine, well healed feminine aspects to them. This is not a man woman conversation. And I've always been a believer that the big shift for humanity is when the sacred masculine is blended with the gifted feminine, that's where balance comes from. That's where we can actually all thrive from. That's how nature operates when nature's thriving.
Mhm.
And a few months ago, a friend of mine, my friends live in Santa Cruz. I live in Monterey. So we're on opposite sides of the bay. So a majority of my community and friends are like 30, 35 minutes away. It's really not a big deal. But I started feeling the call to want to move. And the house that I'm currently living in, I bought when I was leaving Hawaii, when I had to be extracted from Hawaii, when I was kicking and screaming and didn't want to leave, but knew I had to because of the loss of my husband and the memories were in every rock, every corner, every building, everywhere. It was like an onslaught all the time. And I had to leave the island. And I've since been told that I was sent forth. There's no getting kicked out, but Paley sends you forth. And I bought this house as my safe house, my place to recover. And I engaged in a lot of your processes and teachings and year-long programs as like trying to really uncover that. And so it's been 12 years. And a few months ago, I decided to try and sell my house and to move to Santa Cruz. What I didn't know, it was going to kick me off on one brutal kind of crazy ride that's leading me to have this conversation today. And, at the beginning, I was excited and it was alive and it was enlivened and it looks like it was all going to come together. And then something shifted and it kind of didn't. But I kept going down the road. But I kept going down the road in what felt like a little bit, now I can say, what felt like a foggy, cloudy, like, am I supposed to be doing this? I want this, but it feels like it's not working. And I found myself back in the place emotionally and energetically and physically as if it was 4 months after my husband had died so suddenly and unexpectedly, where I was like, I don't want to be here. This is not okay. Like, knees bent, pounding the floor. Why have I been forsaken? I know this is intense. Just taking a breath,
For breathing with you.
right? And I'm an intense emotional feeler. And so this takes over my whole body. And so fast forward a little bit, I found myself in a situation where I was buying a house and someone was trying to buy my house. And the bookends of it looked like the seller of the other house were two females gaslighting me via email. Like, we get the washer doesn't work, but you're just being emotional. We're not going to fix it. I get that the HVAC doesn't work, but at the end of the day, it's not that big of a deal. We're not going to give you any repairs or money. And this is going on for 3 weeks, but somehow I kept staying in it, which
Mm,
normally I'm out fast.
mm.
On the other end, I have investors that want my house pressuring me, want $100,000 less and want me out in 10 days. Nothing's negotiable, don't care about my situation. And then there was this crescendo moment where I was like, whoa, this is what I teach women not to do. It's grossly get taken advantage of, gaslighted, told you're less than, you don't deserve what's real, right? And gaslighted by other women was so, that took a grief moment. It was like, wow, right? There was no men involved. It was really interesting. And then I got someone pressing on me on this side going, you need to get out. And it felt like a sandwich. It felt like, when you have a zit that hurts and it needs to be popped. I'm sorry for the gross visual, but it was that kind of like boom. And I called and I went, this is exactly what I tell women not to do, is to get taken advantage of, to not have boundaries, to not know when to say no, to not honor your no, to not honor. We can justify all these things. Oh, it's only $7,000 worth of repair. I can take my washer with me, and all the realtors were trying to problem solve versus get what was integrity.
Right.
And then this buyer is like pressure, pressure, pressure. And I'm like, that is gross. I was never going to take that deal, but grossly underpaid. And I watched myself be in this epic prosperity thing. And I started to ask myself, why is anxiety my go-to? And it started to come to me that I picked up stuff from my mom in the womb. Now, this is not blaming any of the ascendants at all, but these pieces started to fall into place about in my lineage,
Mm,
what got passed, what came through is scarcity, that it's scary to be here. Now,
mhm,
remember, these are World War I, World War II, depression in the United States. They saw slavery. They saw people get moved from half a world away to here and oppressed. Whether they were slaveholders or not, they witnessed oppression. If you did anything other than have kids and keep your mouth shut, you were persecuted, period. Witches, right? All of it. What came through was scarcity, became scarcity, became we're not worth it, became part of a big oppression on the feminine, of the feminine not being allowed to be prosperous because you would be looked at as either a prostitute or somebody who no one wanted to associate with. So you created a break in belonging. And I was just like, whoa. And this all came through really fast. Right now, I know there's really good lessons in there because these were strong women and they had fortitude. But what happened next was just about 4 days ago, people had been coming and going through my house, and I could see traces of footprints like ghosts on the floor. I pulled everything off of the floor. It's 1,100 square feet roughly downstairs. I took out a washcloth and I put Dawn and got it all sudsy and put some vinegar on it. I got down on my hands and my knees and I washed the floor. Of all the people that passed through and anybody that left anything, and I just restored their energy and made repair with them for whether good or bad or whatever. But then what happened? I started seeing large river rocks, and these chants started coming through me. This was not planned. Chants started coming through me, and I started repeating mantras of right hand washing off what the lineage had inherited about scarcity and about hard times and scary to be here and all the fear, right? Then I would dry it with a cloth and polish it and restore. I felt like I was reclaiming that liberation. And I did that, it was about an hour, maybe 75 minutes. I was dripping in sweat. My cat's howling at me, right? And I'm like black rags. I had to go get more and more washcloths, but I did it by hand. The towels were black. Everything was black.
Wow.
And it was this like, then I started to go back in time where, oh, being a girl, washing the floor out of a wooden bucket, getting kicked by wealthy passersby, getting thrown a penny or sixpence. I kept seeing sixpence, must have been Britain, right? But this just like for whoever that was or wherever that was. And I started passing that cleansing. So you talk about repair and restoration. It kept coming. This ends with me.
Mhm, mhm,
That's what I feel like this time is about. I know that was a long story. I want
mhm,
to turn it over to you. And just like, that's why I called you, because
mhm.
I felt the call of the ascendants saying, we passed a torch. This isn't the one we meant for you to carry. This ends with you. Please.
Thank you, Julie, for letting us witness that and that you got out of that, right? So that's complete now. Those two relationships, right? Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
I love that the ritual of cleaning turned into this bigger ritual. It's all connected. So I just want to honor your story and honor that you said no.
No.
Thank you for that. And I
I feel
think
like I
that,
dodged a karmic bullet that would have been a very long financial drain and mistake.
mhm,
Like, I feel like I want you to talk about the setup because it felt like a setup.
it is a setup. I mean, it is a setup right now financially, right? Like
Yeah.
as soon as we lost the gold standard, which had, gold as an invented value anyway, but
Yeah.
indigenous people thought of gold not as commerce, but as the one of the first creations of the mother. So it has that old value of beauty. And then it what became it's a limit, it's a finite resource from space, and it became this standard of measure. As soon as we lost that, you lose the math. And so we've been in a process of losing the math where there's no there behind those ones and zeros anymore,
No.
right? And so
Right.
that's in a process of extraction on paper, right? And we talk about the 1%. I mean, it's literally, it has to collapse. There's nothing behind it.
There's
And
nothing
so
behind it.
inventing other structures and other ways of navigating money, and it's all more digits, but there's nothing behind it. And so when we are playing in an extractive capitalist environment, as soon as you engage, and whether that's property insurance or the fees to close or the interest rate on the loan or whatever all those things are, when you really get to the math doesn't add up for you to ever pay
No.
off what you're getting into. In fact,
No.
it just keeps getting bigger
Yeah.
unless you get a windfall, which
Right.
is most of us are not going to get,
Right.
right? And so we're in a place where as soon as we engage with those structures, we actually are getting behind her and behind her. So like in my company, I have the same revenue annually that I've had since 2018. I have just as much engagement. I have just as many sales, and the profit and what I need to do to get any, it has disappeared. So working harder than I've ever worked, having similar numbers. And part of that is because of decisions that I made that included, so as soon as you go into interest bearing relationships,
Yes.
you, I started to do the math and I started to look at, like, if someone borrows $100,000, you don't just need $100,000 to pay it off. You need a
No.
100,000 clear. And in
Yeah.
order to get 100,000 clear, and I started looking at all the
That's
factors,
exactly right.
and the numbers don't add up for me to get it clear again. right? Unless there's an extreme windfall, which then creates us doing extreme measures. And so I had something similar, as you know, that I also just got
Yeah.
out of,
Yeah.
right? Because I got
Yeah.
into, I was like, am I on the wrong side or the right side of capitalism?
Right.
I qualified for the dream house, and then you do everything you can to uphold that dream house. And so I just got out myself. So
Yeah.
I'm with you on
I
that.
know you did. Yeah.
Yeah. And so when we look at women and property, we're still learning, you all, how to do this because,
We're still learning how to do this, and the game keeps changing in fairness.
and we were not allowed to hold property.
No,
We were property.
we're also not expected to. So it's not in the field, right, that you should do that.
Yeah. I mean, just like 20 or 30 years ago, I can't remember the exact date. It would, if you were an unmarried woman, it would say unmarried, but it doesn't say unmarried if it's a man, right? So those old extractive systems want to keep us suppressed. And we are like, in the United States, this is hard to even imagine, less than, so there's only 2% of women owned businesses that are making over $1 million in the
That's
United States.
right. That stat hasn't changed either in 2 years.
Yeah. And so when I heard that, I was like, okay, so I'm one of that
Yeah.
2%, right?
Right. Right.
And oh my gosh, because I know thousands and thousands and thousands of brilliant women entrepreneurs. And what does it cost to maintain a business in this particular climate where, software as a service could go up 30% and without notice, right? So what I'm noticing is that everything's getting more and more expensive. Profitability and margins are becoming less and less.
Yeah.
If you're behind, you're getting behinder and behinder. And I'm looking at my own lineage and saying the same thing as you. It's like, this has to stop with me,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
This has to end because this is not workable. And I know that you all are experiencing similar yet different things. Your story is different, your lineage is different, what you learned in the womb is different. And at the same time, maybe you can look at the stories that we're sharing. And yeah, these are stories of privilege. We are privileged white women who are talking
Absolutely.
about real estate and we're aware of it. But one of the things that Julie and I are both committed to is helping women purchase the right kinds of investments so that you're not beholden to the structure. So we're in it and we're learning how to do it ourselves. And Julie and I just went through our
Yeah.
lifetime experience of getting, trying to right size ourselves instead of getting bought into
Yeah.
this other model.
So well said. And I feel like this whole thing is really, I'm going to declare this is the reclamation of the prosperous feminine.
Yeah. All right.
And women over 50, can you see how we've gone through an incredible arc? Our bell curve is pretty interesting and extreme, right? My mom was the first generation of women who could vote.
Right.
She was still carrying the idea that marriage was her financial plan, right? That was
Right.
the assumption, but it was already breaking down in the 80s. Gary
Right.
Zukov, in his book, Seed of the Soul, one of the most impactful books of my entire life, there's a whole chapter. I've gone back and revisited it because I kind of missed it a little bit. Whereas whole chapter about the archetype of marriage
Mm.
having started to crumble and fall apart, but women haven't put a new plan in place. We're still sort of reeling from the disruption of what you were supposed to do and be. And I feel like why I'm so committed and devoted to entrepreneurial coaching, artist, healer, speaker, women over 50 is because this ends with us.
It has to.
It has to.
We do have to look at our moms and our grandmas
We do.
to look at what the lineage is and what's happening. Both my moms, like my mom when she was the first female owner in her lineage, right? But
Yeah.
then she passed. All of that went to my stepfather. She didn't know enough about it to know that her half would go to her children. And that happened also in another family member where the next wife or whatever takes everything from the kids because the mom didn't know enough about how to do it.
Yeah.
Then that's assumed. And then in my other mom situation, one mom was forced sale on a property and got a loan and paid on it for 20 years and it never went down.
Yeah.
And so I'm sandwiches between these two moms who was a first line of property owners in their life, the thing they were most proud of. And in the end,
Yeah.
not there, right? So I'm also trying to break that pattern. And it's hard because you get caught up in, well, yeah, but I could approve. I got a card, or I could approve for this level of house, or I could get this nicer car, or I could invest in this business or build this website. And we just feel so tempted to engage because we're gonna, spend money to make money, as what they've told us. And at the same time, we each have to look at where we are and also what are our values and how are we going to play enough to stay in the conversation, but not be taken in by it. And if Julie and I, who talk about this stuff all the time, who are studied, who have made our own millions of dollars, if we got taken in this cycle, let me tell you what, it's happening. And I have friends who are losing houses and businesses right now who didn't get out in time or whatever that is, whatever the timing is for getting
Yeah.
out before you collapse.
And our intention here in this conversation is not to scare you, to empower you, to
Yes.
really look at consciously anxiety, urgency, false urgencies,
Oh, baby.
FOMOs.
Mhm.
Where are people striking those notes around you? Encouragement is to take a step back.
Yeah.
I will always say revere your own knowing over anything else, over anything what's happening in the field or whoever's trying to sell you, push you, move you, whatever. I'm definitely engaged in sales. It's one of my strong suits and gifts, but only where it serves. And to be of the highest integrity and ethics that I can be. And there is a massive sea change happening. And there's a lot, part of the matrix is temptation.
Right. That's right.
And what's motivating your urgency to, is it an authentically real, true, aligned thing to do? Or is someone trying to rush you and hurry you up?
Mm-hmm.
The pressures.
Yeah. And the selling to pain, which neither one of us do. So that selling to pain is occurring across almost every system. And it's getting trickier and trickier as they know what we're Googling late at night. And
Yeah.
then they're using
And the AI
those.
is collecting info as well. Um, we do have some power in relationship to AI, though. You can program it. And so, as we wrap this up, I want to talk about that. If you're feeling any of this and it's resonating, one of the things that I started to do that you can do, and even Shiloh can share some of hers as well, is maybe you get out pen and paper, you go to the canvas and you do a very intentional, light a candle, have at least 30 minutes of sacred time uninterrupted. One of my favorite things to do is non-dominant handwriting. So if you're right-handed, you would write with your left and it's going to be sloppy and unreadable. And that's not what this is about. But it gives you faster access to consciousness and get into a dialogue with your ascendants. And what do they want you to let go of? And your descendants, what are they asking of you? And do a two-part ascendants, listening to them, because mine are talking to me.
Mm.
Mine created, we want you to see this so clearly that you have a trap radar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love
That
that.
my fogginess and I wasn't feeling well. I had body chemistry, I had a mental, emotional stuff, but it was like, what? But one of my goodness of my lineage that got passed through is clarity of pathway,
Mm-hmm.
clarity. You stay on that path.
Mm-hmm.
I've gotten a lot of my strength and ability from the cats,
Mhm.
how they do it, while having backstage passes to watching leopards hunt,
Mhm.
which technically doesn't even make sense, what I just said. Right. And so, Shiloh, what would you offer people as a way to start to develop an ability to stay above, stay empowered in this in the US, it's potentially going to get really messy.
It is, yeah. We're there. We're in that
Yeah.
moment. Um, I would say I would change from above to beside. And
Okay. Fair.
I like to do the visualization of seeing like the power structures. And when I engage with them, go to the bank or pay insurance or whatever, I'm really conscious of exiting my regular field condition and going in there and then closing that file. So there's a way that we can become conscious of needing to engage, and then you literally close that file down energetically. Most of us go to sleep at night with hundreds of files of what we opened and engaged with that day. So
Yes.
to return your energy to yourself and then be beside, because there's a lot of people who are over in those structures of
Yeah.
whatever it
They
is.
serve and
And
support.
yeah, so we're not abandoning the structures. The majority of people are existing inside of, they don't know where they even are. So I like to keep my eye on the structures and serve people in the structures. But then the primary thing is to have my own identity,
Yeah.
my values, and how I'm doing it be authentic to me in relationship to the people that I'm serving. So there's like this alignment of who I'm serving, the value of my service, and making sure that there's a flow and right relationship with that. And then being conscious of the side by side engagement, not being taken in by it. And so that piece, so to me, that's like a ritual of sort of removing my field from being dominated by that.
Yeah.
The other piece that Julie brought up at the beginning is what was the financial condition of your mom in the womb? It's not always that it was poverty, we didn't have enough, as was my case, we were on, food stamps. But it's not that. It's actually your mom's belief that she ended up having over time that got passed to you unconsciously about money, and deciding for that to complete with you. And if you do the journaling that Julie said, it's probably already coming to you in a new way right now of like,
Yeah.
oh yeah. And then
Yeah.
notice how that has played out. So my mom's was, um, I don't need money to make money. We're always just going to have enough, and we're going to make it by the power of our hands. Well, guess what I've done? Even though I've ultimately scaled, quote, I'm still doing exactly the same thing. I don't need money to make money. I could just invent money out of thin air. Let me just do this next thing. But it doesn't end up working, right? So it didn't work. My mom, my grandma just spun their wheels their whole life. My mom made her first six figures when I was like 8 years old. It's like a miracle to do that back then, right? She was not able to keep any of it because she just kept in that pattern. So I recognize that pattern was passed to me, and I work to keep it conscious and say, like, how am I doing that? Right? How am I continuing to perpetuate that? And what is the solution to completing it? And there's no blame for mom at
No.
all. Like, I
No.
get it. Like,
They
wow,
did the best they
yeah,
could.
she was in survival. But it's up to me to stop making decisions in that framework. So it's like I need to shift my
Yeah.
framework, like changing my radar of like, oh yeah, so I'm not doing the power over thing. I'm not doing mom's thing. And I'm not necessarily doing my own thing either, because I'm in relationship with the guests who eat at my table. So it's not my thing at all. It's actually like, as a community of women working together, what is best for us right now?
Yeah.
So if we each do our work like that, then we'll make informed decisions together and not hurt each other.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I had the unique experience of being nurtured financially by my father.
Mm,
My my mother's, that's why sometimes there's a conflict, because my mother's story and outlook was very different than his. Hers was something bad's going to happen.
mhm,
And what I want to leave everybody with is just understand something here, that we incarnated into a paradigm that already existed,
mhm,
that was already defining, controlling, allocating currency and money.
mhm.
So our money is still in those systems. But your job is to have a conscious relationship with how you want money to work with you and how you want money to serve you and others when it comes to you from other people. What's the intentional portal that comes through? And when you spend it, what's the intentional portal it goes out? I have a number of multi-million-dollar investments that are in things today I would never support. And my choices, when the money comes to me, it's cleansed and purified and restored and repaired. Because to cancel those out would cost me a lot. So I'm unwilling to do that because that's part of what the matrix wants to do is punish you for not playing their way. So I'm going to do it differently. That's my choice. No one has to do what I did. But just understand that we're trying to really look at how bound by the paradigm we are versus how you can work with it, but not be afraid of it and stop being mad at it because that is limiting your flow. And this is about reclaiming that lineage of the prosperous feminine because I feel like we'll leapfrog this whole thing when we kind of all come together and something shifts.
Okay, can we talk for another minute here?
Yeah.
Okay, so
There's no way you and I can do a short conversation.
I know, right?
There's too much to say.
Yeah. So let's talk about the prosperous feminine for a moment, right? So
Yeah.
we've been talking about our moms, we've been talking about the culture that we were born into. I just want to make the point that Lynn Twist, who wrote The Soul of Money, was in the audience when Buckminster Fuller identified that scarcity was enforced and not a reality. And she had been working for years with the Hunger Project, which I did my first fast at 5 years old for the Hunger Project. We thought, oh my gosh, all we have to do is provide enough food, and there's enough food, so then there will be
Yeah.
no hunger, right? So
Right.
that was back in the early 70s where we actually thought we could make that kind of difference. And then it was quickly discovered that actually wasn't the issue. So when you identify the power over structures, you need to understand that they're creating it. It's an invention. The impacts of that reality are real in our day-to-day life, but it is actually a complete fabrication because there's enough food and resources on the entire planet for everyone. Every
Yep.
single thing that was needed by humans to make this a beautiful experience was already provided and was complementary and free grace of the universe. Every plant, every animal, every flower, everything we needed, every resource in the whole world was created however you believe it got created, and it was complementary. And so when we started to extract and own, and by the way, just even thinking you can own anything is a complete fallacy. And Julie and I are completely aware that we're playing that game of owning, but we
Yeah.
know that the land owns itself. It cannot possibly be owned. So there's that piece. And then the final piece about this, I just want to rescue the word matrix from the idea of that being the power over structure, because the root of matrix, it means womb. It means mother, it means matter, and it means the substrate in which everything occurs and has its being. Like an opal in a matrix is the gemstone inside of the actual place where it's growing, right? In archaeology, the matrix is the place where you're working. A pregnant animal, the baby is in the matrice, right? The stars are in the matrice of the cosmos, right? So there's a way, that amazing movie, The Matrix, and we've started to think of it that way, but that's part of the issue is actually referring to that power over structure as the Ma, as the Matrix,
Yeah.
using her name and creating things like Oracle or Amazon, or
Yeah.
like they're actually taking the divine feminine prosperity that's inherent everywhere and they're commodifying it and then having us demonize the word Amazon or the word Oracle or the Starbucks mermaid, who's an ancient Greek mother, right? Like they're specifically using the images of the feminine and the language of the feminine to have us turn against this idea. But what happens to a people if we are behaving as a people separate from our matrix that we have our life in? We have power over, we name it, we can own it, we can chop it up, we can divide it, we can borderize it. So we're behaving out of matrix. And so one of the most powerful recoveries that individuals can do in my work and worldview is to reacquaint yourself with the matrice of your environment, that you really see yourself as held inside of it, because we actually are. and then to repair that relationship with it, and then start, I just say power over structures instead of patriarchy. It's like any structure which exerts power over hierarchical, so that I can start seeing that, because that's what's false. But what's really real is that we're held in a matrix that has us have our being. And so even that psychology has messed with us. The Ma is ultimately abundant. She is 40,000 years of images. And no matter how much the power of her structures tried to silence, cut off, hide her story, bury her, drown her, all the things, she actually just keeps appearing over and over and over. And what is the most prolific, abundant thing on the planet to this day is actually the image of the feminine, period. Like, she is everywhere. She's in the supermarket. She's on the front of the candles. She's literally everywhere. She's multiplying herself. And she's
Yes.
multiplying herself, saying, see, here I am. See,
Yeah.
here I am.
Yeah.
And so when we get into that and be like, oh yeah, I'm held inside this, and she just keeps showing herself to me, whether that's the Magdalene or the Black Madonna or Lakshmi or whatever form, but she's everywhere, on your street, in your neighborhood. She's behind Julie. She's in my space. I have,
That's Lakshmi over here. And
here's
I
the
always
Black,
get,
here's
and
Black Madonna
I have
Guadalupe. Thank
Isis on a bowl.
you. Yep. So she's everywhere. So
Yeah.
the truth is there is enough. And the truth is
Yes.
we are held.
Yes.
So hold the truth, identify the false, engage with it only as needed, and then return to the truth of your being, and then promote, create, and invite people into what is true, which is, this is paradise. We're not living in it as if it is, but actually it is.
Yes. It is paradise. Well said. I love when you preach. Go. The matrix, I see it as one of those like laser grids, right? And where am I in it? And where is there a tripwire and where, but it requires a sovereignty of inner listening, trusting that wild instinct, which I learned from these of my leopards specifically is what saved me in corporate America. It's how I earned my way out. It's how I made multiple millions of dollars, was that inner navigation, wild wisdom of untethered, unbounded, free knowing. And that's where we need to go.
Mhm.
So just understand where you are. And is the matrix trying to Velcro its idea of you're supposed to suffer to you? Or will you be held by the Ma and let her show you where the prosperous feminine pathway is? Because there is one, there's a way out. There's really good decision making. There's noticing traps and tripwires all the time. I think we're at a place where that rigor has escalated and we need to really keep our eyes on things.
Yeah, we do.
And
And
it's
then
all going to be okay.
point it out to each other. What do you
Point it out to each other.
what
100.
emotions you're experiencing? What is the intuition you got? What are the dreams and visions? Like, let's share, because we're going to need to stick together in this.
And cultivate and empower each other in our knowing versus you deciding if what they're doing is right or wrong, having no impact on the other person, but instead nurturing and encouraging. And as a sisterhood and in our containers, really enculturating the idea of letting someone be who they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, my friend. I have 5 other conversations we can keep
I know.
doing. But like,
That's the prosperous feminine. She multiplies herself.
she multiplies. It's
Right.
a multiplier. It's an archetype, it's an energetic. And ever since I've been on this pathway since I was 5 years old. I'm not letting it go. It's mine to do. It has different iterations. The dreams fulfilled of wildlife photography is all part of this. And being just a wildlife photographer isn't enough. And being just a feminine business mentor isn't enough. It's where these worlds come together, because then all of me gets to be here. And that's what's needed for to do my part in the shift.
Mhm.
And that's what I encourage from all of us as well.
Mhm.
Thank you, Shiloh, for your wisdom, your time, your consciousness, for all the epic curation that you've done.
Thank you. It's an ongoing journey.
Yeah.
It's an exploration, and You know, for those of you who aren't in a relationship with a specific ma from a specific culture, then look to nature, look to plants and animals, you know,
Yeah.
because depending on where you live, you may or may not have access to the ma is, from a goddess perspective, is very regional. She's very much about place.
Yeah.
At this time, like, we both have sculptures that represent energies that are from different places than we're from. We're conscious and aware of that and engage in conversation about that, but it's representative of the life-giving force of creation itself. And the different goddesses are like facets of that creation that humans made in honor to honor the relationship with her.
Yeah.
Ma didn't make them, humans made them, and like, here, Ma, here's our greeting card, put it on your fridge, you know.
Yeah.
So it's but she's found right outside your door.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I feel like we may not have another level of this conversation, but this is the beginning of a money medicine journey and a shift. And we're scooping you in, knowing that you're standing next to us. This isn't an above you guru kind of a thing. This is real women doing their real work in this world at this time. And we just want to link arms with you all. So thank you for listening, and share this with other people if you feel like it'll touch them as well.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.